All right, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. This is our monthly new partner introduction. So thank you for turning up here today. What we're going to do is we're going to go through our products and provide just some sort of high level overview of some of the different products we offer, some of the things that may be different or unique about them compared to our competitors out there in the marketplace, and also provide just a little bit of background on who Zyxel is. As we go through today, if you have any questions, send them in using the Zoom interface on the question and answer box or tab or option. Try to use that. Don't use chat. Chat's kind of hard for me to see as we go through the presentation, but I can see question and answer, and I will do my best to answer those questions as we go through the presentation. So we'll start off with a little background on Zyxel. So we've been doing this now for a little over 30 years. We've been making computer networking products since 1989. We are a global company. We serve 150 different markets globally. We have over 100 million devices deployed out in the field. Our US office is based out of Anaheim, California. That is our sales, that is our warehouse, that is our marketing, and that is our tech support. So when you call in to tech support during West Coast hours, you are dealing with a Zyxel employee based out of our headquarters here in Anaheim. Although we are on a hybrid work schedule, so you may be talking to somebody working from home rather than in the office physically themselves. So you're here probably because you've recently joined our partner programs. Just wanted to highlight a few things here. Being a member gets you access to things like today's webinar that you're going through here. It gives you access to deal registration, gives you access to automatic discounts through most of our distribution partners based on your level in the partner program. It gives you access to our pre-sales support team, Marcus, our pre-sales engineer, and some other things like that for you. So when we're looking and talking about today are our channel products. These are products intended for the VAR, for the end user, for the system integrator, for the managed service provider. And we split them up into a couple different categories. We've got security appliances. Those are your firewall UTM appliances, wireless solutions specifically focused at Wi-Fi, switches, our consumer gateways and power line products, and network management. So we'll go through and we'll talk about each of these different categories with the exception of the home routers and power line. So we'll start by talking about Nebula. Nebula is our free cloud management solution that we offer that works with, these days, most of our products that we sell through the channel. So let's briefly go through what it does for you. And basically what this is if you're familiar with, say, Cisco's Meraki, it's a very similar type solution, but aims specifically at the SMB space instead of aimed at the enterprise space. It's something we have offered now since 2016, so we've been doing it for a while. We're constantly rolling out updates, new features, new support. And the idea behind it is just to make your life easier, to take a lot of the hassle out of what's involved with deploying a new network for one of your customers or managing those networks over time, especially if you're providing managed services. So with Nebula, you can get up and running in just a few minutes. We have a number of tools in there, wizards, cloning things, and just standard default features that allow your devices to get on the internet very quickly. You don't need to take a product out of the box to set it up unless you absolutely need to have a fixed IP address on the device when you first install it. There is nothing that you need to configure on the device itself. All you do is take your mobile phone, scan the QR codes on the outside of the boxes of the hardware you're going to deploy, and assign them to your customer and the specific site you're planning to send them to, and then ship the boxes out to that site to get plugged in. Once they get plugged in, they will connect to the cloud. They will see they're being cloud managed. They'll know which customer they're at, and they'll automatically download the configuration for that customer and site. They'll update their firmware. They'll do everything. There is no need for you to go into the GUI on the device itself. It's all done through the cloud. So Nebula doesn't require anything extra. The agent that allows these devices to talk to the cloud is built into each individual piece of hardware. So there's no controllers that you need to buy. There's no wireless LAN controllers. There's no software that needs to be installed anywhere on the network. No cloud keys, nothing like that. Simply buy the hardware, plug it in. It does everything on its own. And Nebula was designed from the ground up to make it easy for you to manage your customers, no matter where you are. As long as you have access to a web browser and an internet connection, you have access to all of your customers' networks. All updates are done through the cloud over the air. So that's configuration changes, firmware updates, what have you, all done through the cloud. No need to go on site, no need to open up and set up VPNs or port forwards to access those devices. It's all handled through the cloud. And Nebula was designed from the ground up to allow you to easily manage lots of customers, lots of different sites. So when you go through the GUI, it's really easy to find the customer site you want to manage, and it's really easy to jump between customers and sites in the GUI itself. So there's no needing to know, different port forward things, different URLs. Just go to nebula.zyxel.com. So we've got some other bonus features here. This is just showing you here if you're using it to manage wireless LAN access points. Some of the information you can see on here, such as users, which users are using the most bandwidth, how many users are currently connected, things like that. So Nebula itself is free. There is no limit to the number of devices you can manage with Nebula or the number of customers you can manage with Nebula. We do offer additional licenses that unlock some additional features, but those are not required to use the devices, and those are not required to manage the core functionality of the products. So when you're looking at our products, you will see the term Nebula Flex. So when Nebula first came out, we treated it very similar to a Cisco Meraki, where it was a separate line of products. So if you wanted cloud management, you had to buy the Nebula specific hardware. That has all changed. These days, what we have done now is we've added Nebula into our existing standalone devices. So you can standardize on certain SKUs and use them for both your standalone customers and for your cloud managed customers. You don't have to manage two different types of hardware. So we've labeled that Nebula Flex. So any device labeled Nebula Flex, you can manage it traditionally directly through the web GUI or through a command line on the device, or you can choose to manage it in the cloud. And it's really easy to do. Out of the box, it will work as standalone. If you decide you want to manage it in the cloud, you simply scan that QR code, add it to your customer site, and the device is automatically going to see that after a couple minutes and will reboot in cloud managed mode. If you ever decide to go back to standalone mode, maybe you move the device to a new customer who doesn't want to use the cloud for whatever reason, you simply remove it from the Nebula cloud, remove it from your inventory, and the device will automatically switch back into standalone mode. Now, one key thing here is the configurations don't carry over between the modes. So just keep that in mind. If you change from one mode to the other, you will need to reconfigure it. And then you will see some products labeled Nebula Flex Pro. So these products, all the Pro is telling you is that these products are bundled with a 1-year Nebula Pro license. So Nebula Pro Pack is one of the additional licenses we offer that unlocks additional features, primarily aimed at the MSP space. It gives you things like a full year's worth of logs in the cloud, including a full audit log that tracks every change made and which admin made those changes. It gives you access to notifications when devices go offline, tools for more tools for cloning, templates for changing settings across multiple sites simultaneously, things like that. Things that aren't necessarily necessary, but things are nice to have if you're doing a lot of management of customers. And then if you see this Nebula Flex Pro on a access point, same thing, standalone, Nebula mode, bundled with the 1-year Pro license. But there's one other thing that the Nebula Flex Pro products offer when it comes to wireless access points, and that is the ability to be managed locally with one of our gateway products. So if you're looking for a large network, you don't want to have it in the cloud, but you do need management, Nebula Flex Pro products will provide that for you by pairing it with one of our NXC controllers or one of our firewall gateway products. Which leads us to network security products. So we've been doing this for a while now. We have spent the last 20 years being continuously certified by ICSA Labs. They are an independent third-party company that provides testing of firewall and VPN products. So something we do a little bit differently, most vendors out there offer UTM services. These are security services that are loaded into your firewall and performed on traffic as it enters or leaves your customer's home network between the internet and the home network. And most of those companies try to provide these services in-house. We do not. So rather than trying to provide all these specialized services in-house, we have partnered with industry leaders out there and have them doing that work for us. So rather than trying to be an antivirus company on top of all the other stuff we do, we've partnered with people like McAfee and Trend Micro. Rather than doing things cloud-based security, we've partnered with Last Line, et cetera, et cetera. So we've tried to partner with trusted names in the spaces that we are offering these UTM services from. So we'll talk a little bit here about some of the features. Most of these features are available across most of our products. There are some exceptions on the lower end products, but for the most part, you're going to find these types of features on our security products. So link aggregation groups, being able to combine ports together to be able to provide either higher availability or increased capacity, device high availability, the ability to have active passive products so you can stack them. So if for some reason one of your gateways goes down, the other one will take over automatically. We can do SSL packet inspection. We have Radius and Active Directory integrations. We offer VPN high availability, the ability to do WAN load balancing, the ability to do multiple WANs. We have a virtual tunnel interface. We have an SSL extender. So this is a nice little tool to use for remote VPN access. It's generally a little bit easier to use than trying to configure the built-in VPN in your end users' devices. We support L2TP over IPsec for those remote users. We have an easy VPN feature that makes it easier to set up site-to-site VPN and also script-based configuration of end user devices. On the UTM side of things, we offer antivirus. We offer category-based content filtering. We offer layer 7 application intelligence. This allows us to set up both content filtering rules and rules in the firewall based not just on ports and source and destination IP addresses, but based on individual application. We've got over 3,000 applications we can identify and the behaviors of those devices. So for instance, you could provide traffic shaping specifically to video chat on Microsoft or on like Facebook Messenger, things like that. So it's a really nice tool to have. It also gives you a lot of reports so you can see not just which users are using your bandwidth, but which specific applications of those users are using your bandwidth. On our higher end products here, we have sandboxing and machine learning. And I think I'll talk about that a little bit more detail on a future slide here. The ability to do botnets and malware blocking, intrusion detection and prevention, reputation filters, etc. In addition to that, most of our security products have a built-in wireless LAN controller that you can use to manage your wireless access points on your customer location. And we also offer as an add-on the ability to do hotspot management, to be able to provide those guest services, not just a splash page and a terms of service, but user management, things like that. We also offer the ability here to create a virtual private network with a cloud-based offering. So we have worked with Amazon and we have worked with Microsoft to do this here, to create this virtual firewall solution. So what that means is you can host your applications in your cloud, your your mail servers, whatever these cloud-hosted applications are that you've launched in your own cloud, and be able to create essentially a VPN tunnel directly from our gateway device to Amazon or Microsoft. So your users can access those cloud hosted applications as if they were locally hosted applications. So when we're talking about our security products, we've split them into 3 different sort of categories here. The simple end of things, we have the VPN series. On the middle here, we have the Flex series. And then on the high end, we have the ATP series. So I'm not going to go through each individual model. There's several different models of each of these. And for the most part, the difference within a series between, say, a VPN 100 and a VPN 1000 is the horsepower, how many packets they can push, and the port configuration. But in general, the features are the same across the board. There may be exceptions to some of the smaller end things like a USG 20 VPN. Those don't really fit in here, but everything else across the different models, it's how it works. So you're just right sizing which one to buy based on, the speed of your internet connection, how many users you need to support, et cetera. So you can see here, all three series product lines offer VPN. They offer that virtual connection here to the cloud for both Amazon and Microsoft. They all offer wireless LAN controllers built in. And what you will see here is the differences start to split up here. So the VPN series is really focused on providing VPN. So if you have a customer that's got a lot of VPN tunnels they need to make, the VPN series is what you're looking at. If you need UTM services, those gateway-based security services, you're looking at the USG Flex or the ATP series. And the ATP series, the difference between them and the USG Flex is the USG Flex is your traditional UTM appliance. The ATP series is going to be what we call a next generation security product. So this is a product, whoops, there we go, that offers some more advanced features like sandboxing and things like that. So the other thing that the VPN series does that's different than the other two is it has the ability to be converted with a license into an SD-WAN box. So I'm going to talk really briefly about SD-WAN. It's something that we can really get deep into, but we're not going to do that today. So for those of you not familiar with SD-WAN, it's software-defined wide area network. And the main reason for these SD-WAN type solutions is to replace MPLS type solutions or tier one ISP solutions, these sort of private networks over public infrastructure with your ISP. So these things tend to be very expensive. You may be limited on your physical locations where you can use them, but the main problem with them is just going to be the expense. They tend to be very expensive. They're not particularly fast. So you say, well, why are people using these MPLS and tier one solutions? And the answer is it's sort of a way of using a third party to create a sort of private internet where all your sites are directly linked together using these MPLS connections. It's really popular for those doing voice. Where they need high quality voice between their different locations. So you'll do something like this. So it's a more direct connection, doesn't have the hops, doesn't have the issues that the public internet has. So SD-WAN is basically a way to offer services that offer that higher tier voice quality, the faster connections as far as latency goes that you get with an MPLS, but allows you to do it over the public internet. It's kind of like a VPN on steroids. Basically, it takes advantage that there is a Zyxel SD-WAN gateway at each location you want to connect together. And because we control the WAN connection on each of these locations, we're able to do special stuff and sort of violate some of the official ways that you're supposed to implement TCP/IP, VPNs, things like that, that allow us to create much more reliable connections and much faster connections than you would generally get using the public internet. So we'll give you an example here. And again, how this works is really a dedicated presentation. So if this is something you're interested in, reach out to your salesperson, let them know, and they can set up a time to go through it with either Tri or Marcus, where they can go more in depth on how it works. But the short version is it makes things faster and solves a lot of packet loss and ping related issues over a multiple site VPN. So here's an example we put together. We transferred a file between our German and our Taiwan office over a standard public internet connection. You can see here there was a 290 millisecond round trip ping time between the two. There was 0.3% packet loss, so not a lot of packet loss, but there is a little bit there. Jitter was 3 milliseconds. And we transferred a 1.9 gig Linux file, Linux distribution. And it took nearly 3 hours to do so over just a standard public internet connection using, I believe, FTP. Doing the same thing using SDWAN, we could transfer the file in just 10 minutes because the connection didn't slow down as it tends to do when going over the public network. We were able to keep it basically fully throttled the entire time. So now we'll talk a little bit about the ATP series because this is something that's a little bit different than what a lot of you may be used to. So your conventional UTM, right? So this is your security services being provided on a gateway. You've got things like anti-spam, intrusion detection, antivirus, et cetera, and it basically works by downloading a signature file from the internet. In the case of us, we are downloading it, or we are having it, designed by people like McAfee, and having them provide it to us. And you get a list of signatures that says, hey, this is good, this is bad. And that's how your device knows what product or what traffic to block. The problem you run into is there are types of traffic you will see that doesn't match those signatures. So the question is, what do you do about these unknown types of traffic? Now, the main reason why you come across these unknown packets is just because this is something new, and whoever is providing these signatures hasn't had time to see this new type of traffic, to classify the traffic, to test the traffic. There's generally a lag of 1 to several weeks between, for instance, when a new threat hits the internet and when it actually starts showing up in the signature files. So the ATP series uses what we call sandboxing and cloud-based artificial intelligence to help us figure out what these unknown packets are. So you're not waiting for the signatures to get updated. We see something that's not in those signatures, we identify it right away. We capture it, we upload it to the cloud, and in the cloud, we've got a bunch of virtual machines that emulate different network scenarios, and we see, what does this thing that we found, what does it do? Is it benign, or is it some sort of new attack we haven't seen before? So it goes through all of that, and if it identifies it as malicious, it reports back to your gateway, hey, this is something bad, we should block it, or it says, hey, this is something good, let's go ahead and let that traffic through. Now, this is a global ecosystem. So when an attack starts somewhere in China, it may take days or weeks to migrate the attack to other countries, such as the United States. And this basically allows our users in China will see this first. It'll go up to our cloud. We will identify it as a threat. So by the time this new malicious type of attack reaches the United States, we've already classified it. Your device is going to recognize it. And this service is being provided by Lastline, one of the leaders in this type of artificial intelligence, cloud-based sandboxing type solution. So that's it for the hardware. We'll move on here to our software on the security side of things. So we've got a cool tool called SECU Reporter. So it's a tool for doing monitoring and reporting of your firewall gateway customers. So it's giving you a single URL you go to manage all of your customers. You go in and you'll be able to get some detailed reports on what's going on your gateway products. So we're taking the logs, we're taking application data, we're taking security data, sticking it in the cloud, doing analytics on it, and generating a number of reports for you to use. So these are really handy type reports for you to provide to your customers to show, hey, look, this is what I am protecting you from. And it's a great tool when it comes time to renew these licenses with your customer, because you'll be able to go to your customer and say, look, here's all the websites that your employees tried to go to that they shouldn't have, that we stopped them from going to. Here's these threats that came into your network, whether viruses or malware or various types of attacks. Here's what we stopped it. If you don't renew this service, these types of attacks are going to get through. So it's a great tool to use to keep your customer informed of what you're doing, what your solution is doing for them, and it makes it a lot easier when it comes time to renew those services or renew your services on top of that. And it is user aware, so you can see exactly, hey, is there a certain user that's got a really bad habit of opening themselves up to phishing attacks? You can find that out. So again, this is designed similar to Nebula in that you have one URL to go to and all of your customers are there for you, and you can configure them each individually. You can also generate a number of custom reports with your own branding to send either to yourself or your customers. So we'll move on from security and start talking about switches. So one of the key things here when you're looking at our switches is we've got a lot of switches. It can be really hard at times to figure out exactly what you need or want. So I'm going to go through here and give you some of our naming rules. And if you know these naming rules, you'll probably be able to figure out what each switch offers, what makes them different. So that way, when you're looking through the price list, you're not overwhelmed. You'll be able to figure out what is what. So to begin with, each of our switches has a prefix. So we have ES, those are our fast Ethernet switches, so 10100 switches. Not a lot of those being sold here in the US. We've got one or two models still floating around for some legacy applications, but you're not going to see a lot of those. Most of the switches you will see will start with GS. So that's telling you all of the ports are gigabit ports. If you see XS instead, that is telling you all of the ports are 10 gig ports. If you see XGS, that is telling you that most of the ports are 1 gig, but there are also 10 gig uplink ports on that same switch. So you're getting a mix of 1 and 10 gig ports. We have the Metro switches, the MGS series. We don't really offer those here in North America. And we are coming out with some multi-gig switches that will have some new namings to try to differentiate between these other ones that maybe offer 2.5 or 5 gig connections. Then at the end, you may see some letters on there. So P is PoE, HP is PoE plus or PoE plus plus. So these days, again, we don't have a lot of the standard PoE. Just about everything we offer is going to be an HP. So if you're looking for PoE, look for HP. And again, those will all offer either 30 watts or 60 watts, depending on the model of power per port. And if you see an F on the end, that is telling you this switch only offers fiber ports. So we offer something called combo ports that sometimes causes some confusion for people because you're counting the ports here. Like on this model here, you will see, hey, there's 8 ports here, and then there's 4 ports here. When in reality, these are actually 2 ports. It looks like 4, but it is 2. So you've got 8 ports here, and then you've got 2 sets of ports right here. And you just are given the option of using copper or fiber for that port. So it's one physical port with 2 different interfaces based on what you need. So you've got 8 gigabit ports here, and then we'll say these are 10 gig uplinks. So you will have the choice of doing copper or fiber for either of those 2. So just to stand out here, when we are looking at our products, what if you're looking for 1 gig uplinks, you use SFP ports. If you're using 10 gig uplinks, you use SFP plus, and we do offer both SFP and SFP plus modules. Some of our ports or some of our switches do offer physical stacking. So with those, you use what we call a DAC cable, direct attached cable, and we sell those. They're short fibers that are already set up with the connectors on them. You plug them in, and it allows the switches to physically stack. In addition, most of our switches also offer virtual stacking for management purposes. But when you need that horsepower of a true stack, that's what you're looking for here, and you will need that DAC cable to do it. So when it comes to PoE, there's 3 standards out there. There is standard PoE, which is quite old at this point, which offered 15.4 watts of power per port. So those would be switches that end in the letter P. Most switches these days are based on PoE Plus, which offers 30 watts of power per port, also known as 802.3 AT. And then recently there has been 802.3 BT, which can offer up to 60 watts of power per port. This is primarily being used on some of the higher end Wi-Fi 6 access points and some of your really heavy duty cameras, pan tilt zoom type cameras that need a lot of power. Most access points and most PoE things will work just fine with PoE Plus, and these are all backwards compatible. So even though the switch is PoE++, it'll still work with older standard 802.3 AT or AF products. So to try to make it a little bit easier, I mean, we've got a lot of different series, as you can see here. We've tried to group them together. What we're calling effortless here, 100, 1000, 1100, 1300 series. These are our unmanaged switches. These are switches that you just plug them in and they pass traffic. The next step up is our 1200 and 1900 series switches. These offer a web interface and some very basic VLAN type capabilities to them. The step up from that is going to be our 1350 series, our 1920, and our 1930 series. These are sort of probably the most popular products that we offer. They offer a web GUI for management. In the case of the 1920 here, they can be managed in the cloud. 1350s can also be managed in the cloud, and they give you a really deep feature set to use. And then we've got what we're calling the Ultimate series here. That is our 2210s, 2220s, 37, 38, 4600. So these are our layer 2 switches, our true layer 2 switches. They all have a web GUI, but they also offer command line interface. And then on the higher end, they offer some layer 3 functionality as well. So if you're looking for a full featured layer 2 switch, you're looking at the GS2220 series these days. The 2210s are being phased out for the 2220s. And then if you need layer 3, you want a 3 or 4000 series product. When it comes to cloud management, as we talked about just a second ago, these products all offer it here, the 1920, 1930, 1350. And then on the higher end here, the 2220 and 3800 offer it as well. So we'll go really quickly through these slides. It's just, visual representation of some of the different model lines that we offer. So you can see here, this is the 1200 series. So again, this is more of a sort of home office type switch. They're desktop based. They have a very basic web GUI with some very basic VLAN functionality in them. Going up from there is our 1900 series. So these are, for the most part, rack mount switches. These are more of your lower end business switch. And these offer web GUI and a little bit more functionality than the 1200 series has, although not full, layer 2 feature set. Going up to our 1920, this is our best selling series of products. Again, most of these are designed for rack mount. These have got fiber uplink ports. These guys here have some heavy duty surge protection on them, and these can be cloud managed. XGS 1930 series, very similar to the 1920s, but these offer 10 gig uplink ports on them. And then our 2220s, these are our, true layer 2 switches. So we'll go on from there. We'll talk a little bit about PoE some more. So something that most of our switches have, I believe it's on everything 1900 series and up, is intelligent PoE management. So the standard way that PoE works is that the device identifies itself as one of a handful of categories, and then that a switch is supposed to budget power based on the category. Unfortunately, the categories aren't very, what's the term I'm looking for? They're not very granular. So for instance, a Cat3 device would require that the switch reserve 15.4 watts of power for it. A Cat4 device would require the switch reserve 30 watts of power, double the power there. And there's a lot of products that need a little bit more than the 15.4 watts, but don't need anywhere near 30 watts. So you end up wasting a lot of your PoE budget. So with intelligent PoE management, It allows you to put more devices on your switch using PoE power than you would normally be able to get away with. So what we do is we intelligently monitor the devices, and we can realize, okay, this is how much power this device really draws, whether it be at boot up or when it's in operation, and we'll reserve just enough power to cover what the device actually needs. So in this example here, we've got this IP phone. It by default is a class 3 device, so it will reserve 15.4 watts of power. Our consumption mode, this intelligent mode, will look and see, hey, wait a minute, this device only is actually using 9 watts of power, and it'll free up the other 6 watts of power for other devices. So you can see here, if we're trying to do 24 phones, if you're using the official way of doing PoE, which we can still do, you would need 370 watts of power budget on your switch to power those 24 phones. Where if you use our intelligent consumption mode, you only need a power budget of 216 watts. So you can put more devices on the same switch or buy a lower cost switch to be able to do that for you to power those devices. So similar scenario here, this time using a pan-tilt zoom camera. It's a class 4 device, so it's preserving 30 watts of power, but it only needs 16 watts of power to actually operate. So again, you're looking at a difference between 600 watts to power 20 of these versus only 320 watts of power using our intelligent consumption mode. I also want to highlight here and call out our 1350 series of switches. They offer some interesting features on them that you don't find on a lot of other switches out there. So they were designed from the ground up to be a surveillance switch, something to use for PoE cameras, but obviously you can use this for a lot more than just that. So one of the cool things we can do is we can provide a connection and PoE power for 250 meters instead of the standard 100 meters that you would normally get on a switch. Now this will be done at a slower speed. It's done at a 10 megabits connection instead of a gigabit connection. But for a lot of applications, you don't need that, but you do need the extra range. So that's one nice solution that these offer. They also offer continuous PoE. So if the switch for whatever reason needs to reboot, it will not cut power to the connected device. So it will not power cycle your camera or your access point or whatever it is you have plugged into it. We also have the ability to go into the GUI of the switch itself, and it will show you the health of any sort of connected device. It'll give you a link to the device's IP address, make it easy for you to power cycle the device, etc. And we have the ability to automatically reboot devices that become non-responsive. So we can use either ping or LLDP to detect when a device becomes unresponsive and then automatically power cycle that device to get it back online for you. No human intervention required. We also have got a little heavier duty surge protection than our standard switches. So in addition to the switches, we do offer some accessories. So I think I've already talked about most of these. We offer SFP modules, SFP plus modules. We offer 10 gig DAC cables, etc. So now we'll move on to wireless. So to make things easier, we sort of grouped our access points into two different categories here for us, the flexible series and the ultimate series. So the flexible series are going to be our 100 and 200 series products or 1000 series products. So that is things like our NWA 110AX or NWA 1123, etc. And then on the high end here, we have our products that support local management. So those are our ultimate series, and those provide, those are models that start with generally 5 or 6. So those are our WAC 510D, a WAC 6303D-S, etc. So those will all come bundled with 1-year Nebula Pro license, and those will also work with the local area controller if you'd want to go that route. So when it comes to our wireless access points, you will feel that they feel very much different than most of our competitors' products. And if you've been to one of our trade shows in the past, you may have seen this where we would have a Ruckus, a Ubiquity, and our product on the table for you to pick them up open them up, take a look at them. We build them differently. We build them to last and survive. So all of our products, even our cheap little like $99 1123 ECV3, all follow this design philosophy. So what you will see on our products is you will see a lot of vent holes out of the back of the access point. So why do we do that? We're dealing with solid state products. And one of the leading causes of failure on a solid state product is heat fatigue. It can cause the switches inside the chips to break. It can cause solder joints to crack, etc. So we want to make sure the heat can get out. And in addition to the holes, what we've done is all of our products will have this big heat spreader plate directly behind the PCBA. This is designed to pull heat off the components on the board and vent it out the back. It's essentially a big giant heat sink. Another thing you will see is we do not use any electrolytic capacitors. That's another point of failure in a solid state device. So we have removed those and only use solid state capacitors in our products. You will also notice that we have a lot more shielding on our PCBA versus most of our competition. Why do we do that? The main reason we do that is because 4G and 5G are often using bordering frequencies that are close to our 2.4 or 5 gigahertz that we're using for Wi-Fi. And in a lot, especially bigger buildings where they have amplifiers or repeaters bringing the signal into the building, even though it's not the exact same frequency, the frequency being broadcast is strong enough that it bleeds over and can cause interference to Wi-Fi users. So we've put additional shielding in there to help prevent that. And then the other thing you will notice is we do not put our antennas directly onto the PCBA, unlike 99% of our competition. We move them onto their own board and put in a deflector plate between that board and the PCBA. So this creates additional isolation for the antennas and helps with signal to noise ratio issues. So some of the technology we have that you may not be familiar with is we offer something called dual optimized antennas. Most access points are designed to be mounted on the ceiling, and they have a single fixed antenna pattern that's designed to radiate out, sort of an umbrella shaped pattern, to the devices around it. Unfortunately, out in the real world, you oftentimes don't get to mount your access points on the ceiling centrally located where you'd like. You may end up having to install them rotated 90 degrees and mounted onto the wall. And when you do that, you get a suboptimal antenna coverage pattern where you're sending a lot of your signal up into the ceiling, down into the floor. You may cause interference issues between floors. We just ran into that with one of our customers with an older hotel where they had mounted the APs directly above and below each other on different floors, and there was enough interference because the signals were shooting into each other like this. So not necessarily the best idea. So our solution to this has been what's called dual optimized antennas. So those access points that offer dual optimized antennas have two sets of antennas, one for the traditional ceiling mount and one that has been optimized for being mounted on the wall. And we let you switch between which set of antennas you are using. We also offer smart antenna solutions. If you've sold Ruckus, you're probably familiar with smart antenna. Similar implementation here from us. And the way smart antenna works, just skipping through some of these real quick, is you know, again, as I talked about, you generally have a fixed antenna pattern. So the way it works with smart antenna is we actually have the ability to go through hundreds of different antenna patterns in essentially real time. And we've optimized the algorithm to choose which antenna to use or pattern to use based not only where the customer client device is in relation to the access point, but we also take into account where other sources of interference may be. And we will create and select an antenna pattern that optimizes the signal for both, you know, the client and for where other sources of RF interference may be coming from. So that way we've always got an ideal scenario type situation. So we've done some testing here. This is comparing us to an HP Aruba. Both of these are 4x4 Wi-Fi 6 devices. And as you can see here, we are the green line, much better performance than the HP Aruba. And then I'll just point you to this here. You can see the little URL on the bottom. So this was a third-party group that a number of years ago got together and said, hey, wait a minute. Are these claims guys like Ruckus and Zyxel are making true? Does smart antenna really make a lot of difference? And the answer is yes. You can view their full report, how they did their testing, what they did here. But what they found was in a lab, in a clean room environment, doesn't make much difference. But in the real world, where you've got lots of sources of RF interference, makes a huge difference in the performance of the devices. So smart antenna is really key anywhere where you've got a lot of access points in the same area, where you've got a lot of wireless users in the same area. It makes a significant difference to the performance in those situations. So we'll talk briefly here about Wi-Fi 6, because that's still something we get asked questions about. So Wi-Fi 6 is relatively new. You've seen products calling themselves Wi-Fi 6 for a couple of years now. Not all of them actually are, supporting the full feature set, but they're out there. They've been out there. So what's the big deal with Wi-Fi 6? So you can get a data rate up to nearly 10 gigs in theory on higher end devices. Of course, just like regular Wi-Fi, there's going to be a big difference between what you can see on a speed test versus the theoretical connected data rate. It's designed to support more users on an access point before you start running into issues. And it's also got some technologies in there which help with interference between different access points. And this is the first new technology since 11N, which applies to the 2.4 radio. 11AC products, 11AC is only on that 5 gig radio. The 2.4 radio is still operating using 11N. So now with Wi-Fi 6, we have the ability to improve performance on both radios. And it's got a bunch of different really cool technologies in here. So we've got the ability to do MU-MIMO in both up and downstream directions. Previously with AC, it was only downstream from your access point or router. You've got OFDMA in both directions, giving you much more flexibility as far as how airtime is utilized. Higher modulations things here. We've got BSS coloring for helping solve some of those interference issues between access points. And one key thing to keep in mind here is not all of these features are supported on all devices. In particular, some of the older products or some of the cheaper products calling themselves Wi-Fi 6 probably don't support upstream MU-MIMO. They probably don't support the full OFDMA implementation, and there may be other features involved. All of Zyxel's access points from the NWA 110AX and higher all support the full Wi-Fi 6 feature set. So for those of you that aren't looking to do the cloud but do want management, we do have the local area controllers. It offers very similar type of feature set here. Intelligent dynamic channel selection, same as the Nebula Cloud offers, a slightly different implementation of mesh, fast roaming. If you are using a controller, our access points will find that controller automatically, so you don't have to go in and configure the access point to work with the controller. It'll do it automatically. And some other features here, dynamic VLAN, etc. So for those, this is a breakdown here of all the different security models we offer and how many APs can be managed. So you can see here, starting with our VPN 50, out of the box, it can manage 4 access points. And through licenses, you can upgrade it to manage up to 36 connected access points. And then on the high end here, the ATP 800 out of the box will support 520 with a gold license. So huge range of products here based on how many devices you want to manage. And with that, we are done with today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. Most of our webinars are recorded and posted to our Zyxel America channel YouTube page. So if there's a presentation we've done in the past that you missed or something you've watched and you think one of your coworkers could appreciate, it will normally be posted up within 24 to 48 hours onto our YouTube page. Please feel free to reach out to us, connect to us on LinkedIn. And we also have user forums. So you can always go there to talk to other Zyxel installers and end users. These forums are also monitored by our R&D and our product management team. So you will sometimes see them responding to questions there. This is also the first place you should go to find release notes, security advisories, etc. They will always be posted to the forum first. And with that, we are done with today's webinar. I don't have any questions coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and end today's webinar. If you do have something, feel free to reach out to me directly, Sean R at Zyxel.com. Sean is spelled S-H-A-W-N. So it's spelled the way it sounds. So feel free to reach out to me offline with suggestions, feedback, ideas for other topics you'd like to see us cover. And thanks for joining us today.